Remakes and remasters have been on the rise in the last few years in gaming. They are certainly a hot topic this current generation, with many asking the questions, does this game need a remake? And I have noticed an uptick in games being remade or remastered since 2020, and they don't seem to be slowing down. They are becoming a problem area of the games industry, but what's inspired today's video was to sit down and discuss the pros and cons of modern remakes and remasters. Why are they good? Why are they bad? And some of the finer points in between. So let's sit down and discuss the problem with modern gaming remakes. The first important thing to clarify is the difference between a remake and a remaster. A remaster usually means a developer takes an original game and improves on many different aspects on it, but a lot of the time it's just paintwork or quality of life features, visual upgrades, audio quality, adding in a new feature here and there. Games that fall into this remaster bucket would be more recently Legacy of Kain, Tomb Raider, the original Final Fantasy VII, and Metal Gear Solid, the original collection. Oftentimes these are re-releases and they're generally put out to give people a chance to replay older classics. Remakes, on the other hand, are much different. Remakes are similar to remasters, but generally the original game is taken as the framework to a developer, which is then rebuilt from the ground up. Or at least most of it. Remakes can include adding new sections to the game or completely changing them entirely, putting the game in a new engine, although it's usually the same as the previous game, but it has its own essence. Examples of this are the Resident Evil remakes, i.e. 2, 3, and 4, Dead Space in 2023, and Demon Souls, and also with the new Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth. These are the rough guidelines that I would give when it comes to looking at a remake or remaster, but they're kind of getting blurred at the moment, so it's hard to say what game is a full remake or a partial remake or, a partial remaster. So you can see how it gets a little bit blurred, especially more recently. But why do people love remakes? Remakes and remasters are like comfort food. When we go back and play them, it hits a certain level of dopamine we haven't had since we first played them. Or it could be your complete favorite game and you just want to go back and replay it again, but this time with updated visuals. I know this is certainly the case with the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, which I've still got to play at some point. We remember why we fell in love with the game. It's like replaying the good old times over and over again. Sure, those games are still available on older consoles, but many people have moved on, sold their consoles, or games that they had don't have anymore, or there's no way to replay them. This is especially apparent with game preservation for games in the PS2 era or in the 360 era, or even going back even further. Trying to find these games digitally or even a physical copy means that you have to have the consoles as well, and they're also not exactly the most cheap options. So remasters and remakes are an important part of the industry for allowing us to keep those games alive. It's also great because it gives people a chance to play old IP that they've never experienced before. Maybe they were too young and they never got into it, and that's why most players will flock to remakes or just changes of older games as well. It's especially great when a remake takes everything that's great about the original and elevates it. Dead Space did this, and Resident Evil 4 are recent examples. For all of the good things that I can say about remasters and remakes though, there is also just as many drawbacks, which is a result of where we are at in the industry. And the first of those drawbacks is most of them feel like cash grabs. Since 2020, there have been a numerous amount of remakes and remasters that have come across as just cash grabs at times. And no bigger culprit of this is Sony with the PlayStation 5. Many times they will offer a PS5 version of a PS4 with a $10 price attached to it for those that already own the PS4 version. And oftentimes the PS5 version of the game, if you don't own it, means that you're going to be charging them $50 or so for a previous generation game, which is kind of laughable at times. I understand that it's easy to make some quick money on these games. You can take that money and put it towards new titles, but it doesn't hold up when the game is only a few years old. There are arguments for games having sections remade and changed, but it doesn't really hold as much value here, especially when you're pricing it at almost AAA release level quality for a game that's already out on the market. And it's not just Sony. Another example of a blatant cash grab was with the Star Wars Battlefront collection. It launched buggy, lacking servers, poor connection, and with no true quality of life features in the update to the game. Even though they put all of the content together, which was fantastic, it left many fans disappointed, myself included, and it just left a massive sour taste of what potential this could have been. It could have been one of the best remakes or remasters for one of these games that's so beloved by so many people, and unfortunately it went down poorly. A lot of the times this happens with older games, and it can leave remakes and remasters in a bad light, and that's just the start of the problem. The second drawback of all of this comes down to the stagnation of the industry. It's no lie that game development costs have soared in recent years, and with the uptick in the amount of remakes, it's starting to stagnate the industry. Now, yes, that could be a bit of a controversial take, but they've become incredibly safe bets to take in order to keep companies afloat, but at the cost of stagnation and innovation. I mean, it makes sense. Why spend all this money and time creating a new IP and a new risk and entry in the series that holds not as much value proposition or a lot of risk rather than reward, when you can look back at what people already love and slightly change things and update it, add a small piece of content, repackage it, and sell it for profit? We are looking back rather than progressing forward, and rather than publishers taking a chance on smaller projects at a reduced price of development so they can put them out a little bit quicker instead of these massive AAA, massive selling games that they need to have all the time, and it's going to cost a lot and have more risk involved. It means that these new IP and ideas never really kind of come to the fruition, at least on the AAA level. In the indie scene, it's a completely different story, but we are constantly looking back at what worked and trying to reinvent the wheel. And it's getting worse when we look at games at the moment that are being remade, and they're only from one generation back, which is a massive glaring issue because that time is getting shorter and shorter between what we are seeing. The level of change from game to game is also getting worse as well. I mean, take a look at these images from the upcoming Days Gone remaster, and they barely look any different. We are really reaching critical mass when it comes to how good games are going to look from generation to generation. I can understand going from PS1 graphics to PS5 graphics, but PS4 to PS5, the leap hasn't been that big, causing stagnation in the industry, and this console generation has been worse off for it. Now, I can say this, but I do want to commend a company that seems to excel in the past few years at bringing back old IP and then also bringing new stuff out as well, and that has to be Capcom. They found resounding success in all of their Resident Evil remakes, but whilst putting out these remakes, they've also added in new games to the franchise as well, with Biohazard and Village. But the trick isn't just to release these games, they actually poll their community so they can see and gauge interest in what they could bring back or make a new entry. I filled out quite a few of these, and they're quite extensive when you actually look at these polls. That's why we see games like Onimusha making a return. They're bringing back another Okami game, which I don't necessarily think was planned, but hey, they're bringing that back, which is really awesome. Dino Crisis Copas are really going hard out there, and someone's begging for Capcom to make an update to one of these games, or even just remake one of them. Lost Planet, and so much more. Capcom is what I look towards when I see as a company doing it the right way, and how they can step towards things while also not making it feel like a cash grab, that everything is done with respect of the previous game and pushing forward and making new games as well. And I think a lot of other publishers should follow in their footsteps, because there's a lot of dormant old IP that's just not being remade or remastered or even having a new entry in the series. We're just kind of forcing new things out that we've already seen before, like trying to remake the God of War games or the Horizon games, that type of deal. Let me be clear though, I don't hate the idea of remakes and remasters, because it has to be the right game and it has to be in the right moment with the right level of care and respect, as I've said. I want to see that Bloodborne update the same as everybody else. I want to see it come to PC in 60 FPS and glorious 4K visuals, but it's not happening for a long time. Jak and Daxter's sitting there, Resistance, Banjo-Kazooie, any number of the early 360 era games. Hell, give me another 3D Konami game like for Castlevania, but that's just kind of saying of games that I'd like to see. But still, there's a lot of games that could be remade and brought up into the current day of modern gaming, but we are just settling for games a console generation back. What I want most though is not for developers to rely on the past to be able to influence the future. I want them to make new stuff, new memorable characters, and look forward rather than looking back. But I just don't think that's going to be the case for a while because of the soaring prices of game development. That's just my opinion. Let me know what you think about remakes and remasters in the comment section down below. Is there any remakes that you want to see, or you just kind of don't get why they've been remade? Let me know. As always, if you've enjoyed this, leave a like on it, subscribe as always, and this has been Jimbo, and I will see you guys next time.